It started with a bark, inside a quiet church where no one expected anything unusual. But what this canine dog sensed, buried beneath a grand piano, led to one of the most chilling discoveries the town had ever known. TV Welcome to Heroic Animals, where we uncover real stories of courage, loyalty, and instinct that go far beyond human understanding. Right finger if you believe in the power of animals and the truth they can reveal. Make sure to subscribe. Turn on notifications, and join us as we follow the trail of bravery, one paw print at a time. Paw. The first time Axel growled during Sunday service. It wasn't loud. It was a low, vibrating sound, barely louder than the rustle of pages turning in hymn books. But Nina Reyes heard it. She always heard it. It was her third month as Willow Glen's new patrol officer, and her first time bringing her canine partner to the old St. Mary's Church, more out of habit than suspicion. Axel, a Belgian Malinois with nerves of steel and a nose that had found everything from narcotics to lost hikers, lay quietly at her feet through most of the service. Until the piano played. The first note of the offertory hymn echoed through the sanctuary. Soft and reverent. A woman named Mrs. Adeline, silver hair in a bun, hands curved delicately over the keys, played Amazing Grace with slow, mournful precision. That's when Axel's body tensed. Nina felt it in the leash first. A subtle tug, then a low rumble in his chest. Easy, Axel, she whispered, resting a hand on his back. But his hackles were up. His head tilted slightly, eyes locked on the grand piano tucked in the corner of the altar. He didn't move, he didn't bark, but he growled again, deeper this time. A few parishioners glanced over, offering tight smiles. One little boy near the aisle giggled and whispered to his dad. "Doggy doesn't like music?" Nina gave a polite nod and a quiet, "Sorry." But her fingers gripped the leash tighter. Axel wasn't the kind of dog to growl without a reason. When the hymn ended, so did the growl. Axel lay back down as if nothing happened. The rest of the service passed uneventfully. But Nina's thoughts didn't. That afternoon, while making notes back at the station, she replayed the moment in her head. She trusted Axel more than any human partner she'd ever had. And she knew one thing for certain, his growl wasn't fear. It was alert. Still, she needed to be sure. She checked the church's surroundings. No signs of explosives, gas leaks, or anything that might trigger a canine trained in detection. The piano? Just an old Baldwin, probably there since the church was built. She let it go. Until the next Sunday. Same church, same service, same piano, same growl. Only this time, it started before the first note. As Mrs. Adeline sat down and lifted the piano lid, Axel sat bolt upright, ears forward, nose twitching. He let out that same low growl, and didn't stop until the last key faded. Nina didn't speak. She only placed a hand on Axel's shoulder and whispered, "I hear you." Later that evening, as they sat in her small kitchen eating leftovers, Nina at the table, Axel beside her with his usual slice of turkey, she looked at him and said out loud, "So what is it, boy? What do you smell?" He didn't respond, of course. But his eyes met hers, unwavering, as if to say, "You already know it's not the music." Nina decided right then, next week, they'd sit closer to the piano. Because something wasn't right. And Axel never lied. The next Sunday, Nina arrived earlier than usual. She chose a pew closer to the front, third row, far left, directly in line with the grand piano. Axel walked beside her, calm but alert, every muscle trained and ready. He didn't tug, didn't whimper, but when he lay down beside her, his head stayed high, his eyes stayed fixed on the piano. It was subtle, but Nina knew him. He wasn't relaxing, he was waiting. The church slowly filled, the same familiar faces, the same old smiles and nods. Pastor Henderson greeted everyone with his usual warm drawl. "Let the light of this new week fill your hearts." But Axel didn't care about hearts or light. He cared about that piano. When Mrs. Adeline sat down, dust puffed faintly off the velvet bench cushion. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Then the music began. The moment the first chord rang out, soft, minor, gentle, Axel shifted. His nose lifted. He inhaled sharply. And he stood. Not in alarm, in certainty. He took one step forward. Nina tightened the leash, whispered under her breath, "Axel, heel." He obeyed, but his body stayed tense. Ears tilted forward, eyes locked on the piano. As the music filled the sanctuary, a strange tension grew in the air, like a current moving beneath the surface. The kind only dogs and cops could sense. When the final note faded, Axel sat down slowly, but he didn't look away. Mrs. Adeline stood, bowed slightly to the congregation, and stepped away from the piano. That's when Nina saw it. A tiny hesitation. As the elderly pianist closed the lid, her hand paused on the top panel, just for a split second longer than it should have. Not nervous, not clumsy, protective. That night, Nina pulled up church records. She wasn't expecting much. St. Mary's was old school. Most of their documents were handwritten, barely digitized, but one note from the archives stuck out. Donated piano, anonymous. Summer 1992. Baldwin upright. Installed by volunteer group. No serial hash recorded. Odd. No serial number? She went to the local instrument registry. Just in case. Most donated instruments still had some tag. At least for appraisal or insurance. Nothing. Then she checked police reports from that same summer. One matched. Missing person report, July 1992. Name: Eliza Jean Harper. Age: 11. Last seen at choir practice at St. Mary's Church. Case closed. Presumed runaway. Runaway? No follow-up interviews. No sightings. No notes. Just a faded photo. Young girl. Thin frame. Bright eyes. A hair ribbon tied like a bow. Nina stared at the screen. Then at Axel, lying beside her desk. You think she ever left the church? She whispered. Axel lifted his head. Didn't bark. Didn't growl. Just stared. Monday morning, Nina stood in front of the grand piano again. But this time, it wasn't Sunday. The sanctuary was empty, filled only with soft morning light cutting through stained glass windows. She had called ahead, telling Pastor Henderson she needed to inspect the space for routine safety checks. He didn't question it. In a town like Willow Glen, no one questioned the cop with the dog. Axel moved slowly through the pews. Nose low, tail straight. His movements weren't frantic, they were surgical. Focused, trained. As they neared the altar, he stopped. Then he sat, facing the piano. No growl this time, no bark, just stillness. The kind that made Nina's skin crawl. She stepped up to the instrument. Up close, the Baldwin looked perfectly ordinary. Polished wood, brass pedals, ivory keys that had yellowed with age. But there was something about it now, something she hadn't noticed before. She tapped the lid gently. Hollow. Too hollow. She ran her fingers along the underside, searching for latches, panels, anything unusual. Nothing moved, but her instincts buzzed. And so did Axel. He stood again, circled once, and began sniffing the footboard. Then the floor beneath it. Suddenly, he let out a sharp exhale. Then scratched once, just once, against the panel beneath the keyboard. Nina knelt, heart beginning to pound. Show me, she whispered. Axel stepped back. She ran her fingers along the seam, and felt it. A ridge, so faint it could have been missed for years. A false panel, flush with the wood. She reached for her multi-tool and gently wedged it into the crack. The panel popped with a soft click. Inside was a shallow compartment lined with red velvet. Empty. Almost. She reached in and pulled out something small, wrapped in faded fabric. Unfolding it carefully, she found a silver charm bracelet. Child-sized. Its surface dulled with time. One of the charms was shaped like a musical note. Another, a tiny dove. On the back, barely visible, EJH. Nina's breath caught. Eliza Jean Harper. She looked at Axel. He sat again, ears forward, watching her without blinking. They had found something. Not evidence yet, but a beginning. That evening, she pulled the old missing person file again. No family listed. Eliza had been a foster child, temporarily placed with a family that attended St. Mary's. The file said she left home in the night, presumed to have run off. But Nina had read enough reports to recognize boilerplate. No follow-up, no interviews with other choir members, no forensic sweep of the church. It was as if Eliza had simply vanished. She dug deeper, into the choir rosters, bulletin archives, old group photos, and there she was, second row, fifth from the left, a thin girl with a crooked smile, holding a songbook too big for her hands. In the margin, someone had written, Eliza, soprano. Sweet but shy. Nina stared at the photo for a long time. Then she picked up the bracelet again. "Where did you go?" she whispered. Axel padded over, sat at her side, and rested his head on her knee. That night, Nina dreamed of music, soft piano notes, playing endlessly through the dark, and a child's voice calling from somewhere beneath the sound. By Tuesday morning, Nina couldn't let it go. The charm bracelet, small, delicate, unmistakably belonging to Eliza Jean Harper, sat sealed in an evidence bag on her desk. Officially, she logged it as an unidentified personal item, but deep down, she knew exactly what it was. And she knew it had been hidden, not lost. She requested the church's full access records. Nothing digital. Of course, just yellowed logbooks kept by elderly hands. One entry stood out: June 18, 1992, piano delivered. Youth choir room locked for renovations. June 18, Eliza disappeared on June 20. Coincidence? Nina didn't believe in those anymore. That afternoon, she returned to the church, not during service this time, but when the building was quiet, empty, echoing with the kind of silence that hums in your chest. She brought Axel. He walked ahead of her, tail stiff, nose twitching with every step. Instead of leading her back to the sanctuary, he veered left, toward the hallway where the old youth choir room had once been. The door creaked open with a gentle push. Dust lingered in the air. Broken music stands leaned in the corners. Sheet music yellowed by decades still clung to the corkboard like forgotten voices. The upright piano in this room had long been removed, but something about the space felt watched. Axel froze. He turned to a framed photo on the wall, a grainy image of the 1992 youth choir, the same one Nina had seen in the archive. 20 children, one missing. Axel stepped toward the frame, sniffed, then growled. Low, deep, instinctive. Nina frowned. She stepped closer and carefully removed the frame from the wall. Something behind it scratched against the plaster. She turned the frame over. Wedged between the backing and the photo was a folded, brittle piece of paper. Carefully, she unfolded it. There were only 3 lines written in shaky pencil. She cried in the piano room. No one heard her, but he said the music would make her quiet. Nina's stomach turned. She stared at the handwriting, childlike, uneven, panicked, a whisper from the past. She scanned the room again, eyes sharp now. There were no hidden compartments here, no dramatic trapdoors, just an old room full of dust, silence, and something that had gone very wrong. She gently returned the note to her evidence pouch and turned to Axel. He was still staring at the empty wall, ears forward. "What did you smell?" she whispered. Axel didn't move. But his stillness was an answer. Something had happened here, something that had never been spoken aloud. That night, Nina opened her laptop and searched for one thing: Eliza Jean Harper plus St. Mary's plus choir. Nothing new, no new reports, no new blogs, but she dug deeper, into digital archives, into old-school newsletters. Then she found it, an anonymous post from a now-defunct message board. "I remember the song, the one she was playing when it happened. It wasn't a hymn. It wasn't even in English. I still hear it sometimes, even when no one's near a piano. No name, no location, but it was dated 2006, 14 years after Eliza disappeared. And someone still remembered the sound." The next morning, Nina sat in her cruiser with the engine running but her mind frozen. The note behind the choir photo kept replaying in her head. She cried in the piano room. No one heard her, but he said the music would make her quiet. And that anonymous post from 2006. Someone had remembered the exact sound Eliza was playing that day, years later. That wasn't memory. That was trauma. She needed to find them. The message board was defunct, but not gone. A few posts had been archived on Wayback Logs and private forums. Nina used every tool she had, and some she wasn't supposed to. She traced the IP of the original post to a public library computer in a town just 40 miles north, Brighton Hollow. She made the drive without telling anyone. No backup, just Axel. When she arrived at Brighton Public Library, it was nearly empty. Just one librarian humming softly and a few seniors scrolling through news on old PCs. Nina walked to the desk. "Excuse me," she said, flashing her badge. "I'm trying to track down who might have used one of your computers to post a message in 2006. The librarian blinked. "That was almost 20 years ago." "I know, but if anyone's worked here that long, A quiet voice behind her interrupted. I have. Nina turned. An older woman stood by the periodicals shelf. Slim, gray hair tied back in a clip. She looked cautious, but calm. You're looking into that post, aren't you? She said softly. Nina nodded. You know it? I remember the girl who typed it. She paused. She was trembling, didn't want to give her name. Just said she needed to write something down before it vanished from her mind. Did she say who it was about? She said the girl's name was Eliza. Nina's breath caught. Did she give a last name? No, but she said she was there, in the room. Behind the curtain. She saw it happen, but no one ever asked her. Nina's hands gripped the counter. She was in the church? The woman nodded. In the choir room. She said she was hiding because she forgot the lyrics to the song. She wasn't supposed to be there. But she heard the crying and the music. And then, she stopped. What? She said it went silent too fast. Like someone pressed mute on a TV. She didn't hear anything after that. Do you remember her name? The librarian hesitated. She used the name Lila. But I don't know if it was real. Nina scribbled the name down anyway. I might have something else. The librarian added. Walking to a drawer, she pulled out a small stack of paper, library usage logs. She signed in that day. No ID, but she wrote something on the back. Nina turned the paper over. There, scrawled in faint pencil, were the words. I didn't help her. Her throat tightened. That night, back at home, she read the note again and again. Lila had been there. She saw. She remembered. And she had been carrying the guilt ever since. Nina looked at Axel, curled at her feet. He was watching her again, not wagging, not panting, just waiting. You ready for the next piece? She asked softly. Axel stood, stretched, and walked over. He rested his head in her lap, as if saying, lead the way. I'll follow. Nina didn't sleep that night. The paper with, I didn't help her, burned in her mind like a confession whispered too late. She spent hours combing through school rosters, youth group sign-in sheets, and old choir programs from St. Mary's dated 1992. Only one name matched a Lila anywhere near that year. Lila Moreno, age 10, member of the junior choir. Vanished from the town records after 1993. No graduation photos, no marriage license, no social media trail. It was like she had chosen to disappear. But Nina had a trace now. She contacted an old records clerk in Brighton Hollow who remembered the Moreno family, especially their daughter who used to sing but stopped coming to church after a nervous episode. Her parents had relocated years ago. But the clerk remembered something else. Lila works as a custodian at a community center now. Quiet girl, doesn't talk much, but she's still in town. That afternoon, Nina found the center, an old gymnasium retrofitted with childcare programs and GED classes. She waited outside the staff entrance until the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long across the pavement. Then she saw her, late 30s, plain hoodie, shoulders hunched, carrying a mop bucket out back. Nina stepped forward. Lila Moreno? The woman froze. Nina held up her badge. I'm not here to arrest you. I'm here because I think you saw something once. Something you tried to forget. Lila didn't speak. Her name was Eliza. Nina continued. You were in the choir room. Behind the curtain. Lila turned her face slowly. And Nina saw it, the terror. The kind that doesn't come from one bad memory. It comes from years of silence. I didn't do anything, she said softly. I was 10. You were scared. Nina said. You were a child, but you saw him, didn't you? Lila's eyes filled. He told us music was holy. That it made bad feelings go away. Nina nodded slowly. Who told you that? Lila looked away. Then whispered a name. Father Glenn. Nina's breath caught. Father Glenn had been St. Mary's priest in 1992, but retired just months after Eliza disappeared. No charges. No accusations. Just left. I didn't tell anyone because I thought it was my fault. Lila said. I should have said something. I should have told the nuns. But when I came back the next week, Eliza was gone, and the piano was locked. Nina gently stepped closer. Did he hurt you too? Lila shook her head. He never touched me. I think he knew I was watching. That line hit like a hammer. Because predators don't like witnesses. And maybe that's why Lila had been left alone. That evening, Nina sat on her porch. Axel curled at her feet. She replayed Lila's confession in her head. Then something new dawned on her. The note behind the photo. The bracelet in the piano. The post online. They weren't random pieces of a puzzle. They were breadcrumbs, left behind by someone who couldn't speak the truth out loud, but needed it to be found. She stood abruptly and grabbed her keys. "Come on, Axel." The dog perked up. "We're going back to the church." Inside Trinity Church, shadows fell differently at night. The sanctuary was empty, but the air felt charged. Nina didn't go to the altar this time. She went backstage, behind the curtain, the exact place Lila had been hiding. Axel followed, sniffing, tail twitching. Then he froze. Low growl. Nina flicked on her flashlight. It caught something faint, scratched into the wooden stage frame. Almost invisible. "I heard her. I saw him." The music lied. Nina stared. Then she turned off the flashlight and let the silence settle. And in that silence, one sound remained. Axel's steady breath. A guardian. A listener. A witness. Nina spent the entire night diving into archived records about Father Glenn Whitmore. He had been the priest at St. Mary's from 1985 to 1992, well respected. Even admired. Dozens of glowing community letters. Volunteer commendations. A reputation built on soft sermons and warm smiles. And then, in July of 1992, he resigned. No scandal. No incident report. Just one vague reason cited in a letter to the diocese. Burnout and a desire to return to private life. But here's what caught Nina's eye. He didn't move far. Just 60 miles north to a monastery. One that refused public visitors and didn't maintain an online presence. She called the diocese office. A young secretary answered. When Nina requested contact information for Glenn Whitmore, there was a pause on the other end. Father Glenn passed away last winter." Nina's stomach dropped. "Are there any records from his time at St. Mary's?" Everything would have been transferred to the parish archives. Nina had already been to the archives once. But now, she knew what she was looking for. That afternoon, she arrived at the diocesan storage building, low ceilings. Rows of metal filing cabinets. Air thick with dust and secrets. She asked to see all files related to the 1992 youth choir. There wasn't much, but there was one cardboard box. Inside were attendance sheets, song lists, sheet music, and then, toward the bottom, a folder labeled, "Private, Music Therapy Project." Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside were typed pages signed by Glenn Whitmore. A personal study. He wrote about using music to regulate behavior in children. How certain tones and rhythms could calm anxiety or provoke emotional responses. Then came this passage. Some children respond more deeply to harmonic structures that mirror human cadence. The piano becomes not just an instrument, but a key. A way to unlock memory. Obedience. Silence. Nina whispered. He was experimenting, but it wasn't science. It was manipulation. And suddenly, it made sense why Axel reacted to the piano. Maybe it wasn't just the sound. Maybe it was what the sound carried. Then, tucked in the back of the folder, she found something else. A cassette tape. Plain. No label. Just one word scrawled on the side in marker. Choir, June 1992. Nina stared at it. She didn't have a player. But she knew someone who did. That evening, she sat in the forensics lab at the local precinct. Her friend, audio technician Cam Torres, loaded the tape into a high-grade reel digitizer. "I've cleaned it up as best I can," Cam said. "It's rough." The tape began to play. First, soft static. Then ambient noise. Footsteps. A child's cough. Then, music. Piano notes. Hesitant. Played by a child. Nina closed her eyes. She recognized the melody. It matched what she'd heard in the background of that video from the sanctuary. It wasn't a hymn. It was odd. Unsettling. Then a voice. Male. Calm. "Keep playing. Eliza. That's it. Feel the silence." Nina's hands curled into fists. More piano. Then, "You're still thinking too much. I need your full focus. Start again." Then another voice. Small. Quivering. "I don't want to." Silence. A chair creaked. Then, slam. Nina stood. "Turn it off." Cam hesitated. "I said turn it off." The tape stopped. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the machine. She was playing while Nina couldn't finish. Cam looked pale. "You need to get this to the feds." Nina nodded slowly. "I will." But in her gut, she knew that wasn't the end. There was something else. Something Axel had felt before anyone else did. And she wasn't going to stop until she found it. Nina stood once more in the cold sanctuary of Trinity Church. No congregation. No music. Just the silence that always seemed too loud now. Axel trotted beside her, ears alert. He had been here before, but this time, his steps were more deliberate. Like he knew they were close. Like every scent in the wood and stone whispered a memory he couldn't unsee. Nina approached the grand piano. The same one that Eliza had played. The one Axel had fixated on from the start. The one that had carried secrets in every note. She opened the lid again, its keys dull under the morning light. "Axel," she said gently, "show me." The dog moved instantly, not toward the keys, but the back panel. Low growl. Nina knelt, ran her hand along the underside. And there it was. A faint, uneven groove, like a seam. Covered by decades of polish, dust, and careful hiding. She grabbed a screwdriver from her bag. "Hold steady, buddy." With each turn, the screws gave a tired squeal. The panel loosened, and then dropped into her hands. Behind it, brown square, a hidden cavity. Inside, a rolled cloth bundle, an old mini recorder, and a box, a child's jewelry box, pink, faded, one corner chipped. Nina unwrapped the bundle first. It contained drawings, crayon and pencil, some torn at the edges. Most were of musical notes, stars, and stick figures, but one stood out. A girl sitting at a piano, tears drawn in blue, and beside her, a man in a black robe with no face. Her breath caught. She picked up the recorder. It was dusty, but intact. She pressed play. Static. Then, "My name is Eliza. If someone finds this, it means you listened." Nina's heart stopped. He makes us play because silence makes him angry. But the piano isn't safe. It hides things. He hides things. I put my voice here because I think someone like me will come one day. Someone with a dog. Dogs don't lie. The tape clicked off. Nina had to sit down. Axel leaned into her, steady as stone. The jewelry box. She opened it slowly. Inside were tiny folded notes, written in a child's script. Some barely legible. One read, "I miss Mom." Another, "The priest said my voice belongs to God now." And another, "If I disappear, it's because the piano stopped listening." There was also a photo. A school portrait. Eliza. On the back, Eliza Marchand, choir 1992, age 9. That name had never appeared in any police record. She'd never been reported missing. Because no one knew she was gone. No one, except the piano. Phone the call. Nina filed everything into evidence. That night, she called the FBI. A calm voice answered. "This is Special Agent Ray Walters. Crimes against children." She didn't hesitate. "I have the name, the voice, the location, and AK-9 who never let it go." "Go on," he said. "Pa the statement." 2 days later, Nina sat before a federal review panel. Axel lay at her feet. Still and watchful. She laid it all out. The behavioral alerts. The video. The drawing. The confession on tape. The piano's secret compartment. The name Eliza Marchand. She didn't dramatize it. She didn't need to. She ended with one sentence. "Without my K9 partner, Eliza would still be a ghost and a song." 3 months later, the pews of Trinity Church were filled again. But this time, not for a sermon. Not for hymns. And definitely not for music. It was a memorial. For a girl who had no gravestone. No official obituary. No family to mourn her. But she had a name now, Eliza Marchand. And she had a story that would finally be told. At the front of the sanctuary stood a small framed photo, aged. Worn. The school portrait Nina had found tucked into the pink jewelry box. Beneath it, a placard with one simple line. She was not forgotten. Nina sat quietly in the second row. Axel at her feet. He wore his K9 vest. But today, there was a ribbon pinned to his collar, blue. Soft. The same color as the one Eliza had drawn in her crayon pictures. As speakers took the stage, federal agents, child advocacy leaders, local officials, Nina kept her hand on Axel's back. Calm, steady, present. Then, she was invited up. She walked slowly to the podium. Her voice was clear, but low. No theatrics, just truth. We don't know how many more stories like Eliza's are still hidden. But we know that for decades, one child's suffering was turned into silence. And it was disguised as something holy. As music. But music never lies. And neither do dogs. My partner, Axel, heard what the world refused to hear. Not because he understood language, but because he understood pain. She paused. In a room full of people who didn't notice. He did. He never stopped listening. Axel looked up at her, tail thumping once against the floor. We didn't save Eliza. But we told her story. And that means she will never be invisible again. The room rose in a standing ovation. But Axel stayed seated, as if reminding them, this wasn't about applause. It was about the work. Military Medal the commendation. 1 week later, Axel received an official commendation from the governor's office. He became the first K-9 in the state to be recognized for uncovering a historical abuse case through behavioral alert alone. Nina didn't want media attention. But the survivors did. Because with every news report, every headline, more people came forward. More names. More voices. More girls like Eliza who had almost been lost to time. They launched a new initiative, Project Eliza. A joint effort between the FBI, child psychologists, and trained K-9 units to reopen and investigate cold trauma spaces, orphanages, churches, youth camps. Axel's story became the model. And his photo, a shot of him sitting by the piano, ears forward, eyes locked, became the symbol. Milky Way the final visit. One evening, Nina took Axel back to the church. It was empty again, quiet, almost peaceful now. The piano had been removed and sent into evidence storage. But the spot where it stood had been marked. A brass plaque in the floorboards read, "To Eliza, the note you left was heard." Nina sat beside Axel on the floor. Sunset light filtered through stained glass. She whispered, "We did it, partner." Axel didn't bark, didn't move, just leaned his head onto her lap. Because he knew. End epilogue. They never found Eliza's body. But they didn't need to. They had her voice, her drawing, her story. And above all, they had a dog who refused to stop listening. The world remembered a little girl. Because her pain made a sound that only one soul could hear. And that soul had 4 legs. A badge on his collar. And a heart stronger than silence. Thank you for staying with us through the end of this powerful story. If it moved you, if it made you think, please take a moment to subscribe to Heroic Animals. We shared true stories where animals become more than companions, they become heroes. Speech balloon. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What did this story mean to you? Leave a comment below and be part of the conversation. Bell. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a moment where instinct changes everything.